Hey, welcome to Whitecap, the Canadian sailing podcast. I'm Dave Krypton, a longtime dinghy sailor and passionate fan of Canadian sailing. Today on the podcast, I'd like to welcome Ken Dool. Ken is a Canadian coaching legend and since 1990 has been the high performance director, chief training officer, and head coach of the national sailing team. Paris 2024 is the 9th Olympics he'll be coaching at, as well as 3 Paralympic Games. Hey Ken, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Dave, how you doing today?
Good. Like I said in the email, you've been on my list for a long time because basically, if we're talking about Canadian sailing, racing in Canada, we got to go back, to Ken Dool. You've been a part of a lot of the history that I've certainly gone through over the years on this podcast.
Yeah, I've been around for a while now. Everybody seems to keep reminding me. It might be the gray beard, gray hair, or the lack of.
You've always had the beard, right? It's just has turned gray over the years.
Yeah, the beard has been a fixture through my whole career. It's actually been put up for grabs at many a world championships, top 10, and people are allowed to tell me what they want me to do with
it. Has it happened? Has anyone gotten that and told you to do something different?
Yeah, no, Hank loved it when he had his back-to-back worlds, but I didn't mind because his was just to do the big handlebar mustache, so take the beard off and leave a handlebar, and then he thought it was ever so clever.
Oh, God, that's great. Actually, that would bring me to one of the short answer questions I had immediately. I have had, actually, of all the sailors that I've had on, almost nobody has played hockey. Like, I don't know if this generation, like my generation or earlier, or later, just doesn't play hockey or what. But I know you played a lot of hockey growing up. What was your position, and what was, I guess, how does that? Because I know Hank obviously was professional. Hank Lammons, we're talking about, Finn sailor, Olympian, 2-time world champion.
Yeah, 2-time back-to-back world champ.
Amazing athlete. So tell me about hockey in your life, and maybe hockey in Hank's life.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it certainly, for Hank, was a connection for the two of us. I grew up in London, Ontario, was lucky enough to get drafted by the London Knights, played for them for a season, and then I played for 2 years in St. Thomas. More than anything, a friend asked, I think I'd found my passion outside of hockey, but a friend asked if I was still interested in doing it, and so I came back and played for another 2 years, which I was really thankful for. It was a very positive way to end my hockey career as such. And it'd been an instrumental part of my growing up. To say, a lot of people say, well, why'd you choose sailing? I mean, ironically, I got offered a job as a head coach with a junior B team the same day I got offered the job to coach in Saskatchewan, which kicked off my full-time coaching career as a sailing coach.
The same day?
Exact same day. And to be quite honest, it was a bit of a toss-up, to decide hockey versus sailing, hockey being a big thing in Canada, obviously, and that maybe that was a pathway that would lead. And then the part for me, to be completely honest, it was that it was a blank slate with sailing. Getting to go to Saskatchewan with really a program that was in complete infancy, and preparing for the Canada Games as the primary thing. And that really appealed to me, that you were going to make your own stamp on something versus falling in with a lot of people. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that idea as a very young and probably idealistic young coach, to be able to make it your own program right away as the first thing you do on a full-time basis was very exciting.
Oh, for sure. And I guess, like you say, you could see what the pathway might lead you to in hockey. And again, so you were a defenseman, I'm guessing. I don't know why.
I was a defenseman, yeah. No, I wouldn't have ever been accused of having a tremendous amount of offensive skill. Probably the most offensive skill had more to do with a few of the knuckles on my hand than my ability to shoot or score. But yeah, I love the game. It was just something we grew up with, playing on the ponds in London. And then, like I said, getting the opportunity to play for your hometown junior A team sort of was, at the time, a little bit of a dream come true. And then, to be fair, the reality was I was passionate about a lot of sports, and hockey was something I happened to be good at, but it really wasn't something that absorbed me completely. There were other sports I was still like sailing, obviously, and volleyball. I mean, I'm a sport freak. Anybody would tell you today. I mean, if you want to know about stats about sports, yeah, ask Ken. He'll know something about it. And if he doesn't, he'll tell you the next day what he knows about it. And I do. It's the first thing I do in the morning. Turn on sports channels and just devour all the sporting news.
Okay.
And it's something I've always done. I mean, I think I've always gleaned a lot from it as well. Listen, and for me, and it probably no surprise, I specifically listened to when Paul Maurice was interviewed after the Stanley Cup. Somebody else might listen to the players talking. Well, I listened to Maurice to see if there's any little gems I might be able to glean out of that for my own coaching. Someone like Maurice I always like because he will talk a little bit about his philosophy and how he believes what aspects change the game without giving away anything about how Florida would play. It's like, this is what I expect out of my team. And those are the types of things I like to hear and try to take something away from it.
Right. So if we were going back to Hank, that's a very, very kind of unique story. He was, a high-level professional hockey player, while at the same time being, like we say, world champion fin sailor. And what years are we talking about? Like that early 90s?
Yeah, so he won 91 were his back-to-back worlds.
Okay.
That he won. And Hank and my career, I mean, interesting. We overlapped sailing as junior age group sailors against each other. And I think within that time, originally I met him, he was a double-handed sailor, and he was just a little pipsqueak of a guy, which might sound funny describing Hank. And then one winter, while he was off playing hockey and I was off doing the same, we came back together the next summer, and he was the Hank that everybody knows now. It was like in one winter's time, he'd grown 6-7 inches, put on 30 pounds, and, became a single-handed sailor and a very dominant single-handed sailor. And then I think, it might sound funny, but him being from Brockville, me being from London, it was like we had a little bit of this us against Toronto sort of thing because you weren't from the center of the universe and particularly the center of the Ontario team universe.
Yep.
And so it was very easy to work together thinking, hey, we're going to prove everybody that you don't have to be from Toronto to be a good sailor or part of the team. And so we often spent time. I traveled to Brockville, he traveled to London, and we just trained together. And for me, then, fortunate enough, when I was first hired, that the first major event I got to do as a national team coach was the Fin Worlds, 1990, Port of Carras, Greece, and had a very solid team. I mean, when I say that, we were 1-2-5 at that World. So Hank was first, Larry Lemieux was second, and Mike Milner was fifth. And so as a coach, to have that as your introductory major event, it was kind of like, wow, this is going to be easy. The reality was it was never going to be easy, but having some great athletes to work with early on, made that initial introduction to high-end international competition probably quite different than a lot of coaches. And it was something I was very thankful for.
For some reason, that reminds me of, I heard a podcast with Caleb Payne, who I'm sure you know, fin sailor, 2016, won the bronze, I believe, in Rio. And he said the first time he raced a fin, it was right up in the Gold Cup, first time, whatever. He bent a corner, first right, tacked ahead of everybody. And he's like, it wasn't like this is going to be easy. He was like, you guys suck. I'm going to win a gold medal this year. And the story goes he ended up last or whatever it was.
No, Caleb's a good man. We spent a lot of time training with Caleb. Tommy Ramshaw and Caleb were, good friends and great training partners leading up and through, up through the Tokyo time. Tommy was, or not Tokyo, Rio. Tommy was a sort of a last year entry into that. They were mates, spent a lot of time training together there. Then as we went into the next quad, Caleb sort of as the veteran helped guide Tommy in some ways to get better as a fin sailor. So yeah, he was a big part of our programming and an awesome guy.
I had a feeling this was going to happen. It was just going to get rollicking when two guys that kind of know the history of the 80s and 90s. But we usually like to start out with like a short answer question or a short answer period. So I'm going to ask you, what can you tell me about the 1979 Fanshawe Cup um, uh, championships, club championship?
1979. Wow, now you're testing me. So what was I? 14 years old. Yeah, was that club championships you're
Yeah,
referring to? Yeah,
yeah,
I think I was probably selling my laser then because I got
yep.
a laser as a 10-year-old. And I might have won the Champion of Champions race selling a laser.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That's 79 champion. I'll take it back even further to the 72 Fanshawe Yacht Club Flying Scot Championships. What happened there?
Well, yeah, sailing with my dad. I know that for sure because that was where, as a 3-year-old, I started crewing for him and sailing with Kerry Benson. And we had some great times sailing the Flying Scot. I mean, it's funny. I was affectionately the Flying Sidewalk is what I called it. But oh yeah, great days out at Fanshawe Lake.
Well, I think that element of sailing is obviously super important, the family connection, right? And I think certainly the athletes I've worked with in the last 10 or 15 years, there's a lot less parents who were sailors growing up. I don't know if that's something you've seen as well. But maybe you could comment about that and also that connection of like how important is the family, like intergenerational connection for sailing?
I think two parts within that. Certainly for me, that was why I got into sailing. I mean, the running joke in our family, or maybe not joke, the running reality in our family. My mom was 8 months pregnant with me. They were sailing. My dad and my mom were sailing a Y flyer together at Fanshawe, capsized. He had to help her back into the boat, so all the blame, on her being pregnant, her to get back in the boat. They didn't perform quite the way they wanted, but then the joke being that became, you know, my baptism by fire, as such, and that got into sailing. And I certainly, owe all of my early experiences in sailing to my parents. And I started, like I said, when I was 3, crewing for my father. He built me a wooden laser in the basement.
What kind of work
house.
does a 3-year-old do as a crew?
What I did best was get sat on. Typically, Carrie was a phys ed teacher as well. My father was a physics teacher, and you'd scamper across the boat, sit down, ready to help hike, and I get sat on by one of the two of them. And then, when they needed weight forward, they probably never did need weight forward, but then I go up under the deck and have a snooze on the spinnaker while we'd be sailing. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember when I used to, I'm cutting you off, but I used to sail with my son when he was like 8, and, having done a lot of double-handing sailing, and then I'd sit down on him, and he'd start crying. And my mind was like back to with all the other crews, and I was like, stop crying. There's no crying in sailing. And I was like, wait a second. Okay, this is my kid. If you want to go in, we can go in. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, and I think the family impact for me started me, pushed me in, not pushed me negatively, pushed me to explore it further. And when I look today, there's absolutely no doubt, like you said, Dave, that there is a difference in that there are more athletes now competing in sailing and more people competing in sailing that don't have that family connection, which is something I think we've all been challenged with how to morph, how we continue to grow our sport and have people enjoy it that haven't grown up in it. But the flip side, when I look at as we get ready to go to Paris here and the family support that's required. To pretend it isn't required, it's required to help the athletes through their youth development days, to help coordinate things now. When I think of Sarah Douglas's father, Peter, still as one of her biggest supporters and taking over her Facebook page during major events. Oh yeah, so that so it still looks like it's current, but it isn't Sarah having to deal with it. Dad's taking it on and make sure it happens. And I think those sort of things, and it's all those little behind the scene things, plus, obviously financial assistance and everything else, but it's so much more than just the money. It's understanding the goal and the pride of achieving and all those things. And, I know the Win La France sisters' parents are coming as well. To the games, and they're massive supporters, and they do all the background work to help in setting up the fundraising and all those things that allow the young athletes to stay focused on what they got to focus on, which isn't about how to raise more money. Yeah, they need the money, but they need to be able to focus on taking care of themselves physically, the mental training, the proper nutrition, and then the number of hours on the water, both in training and in competition, to then throw on, oh, but you also got to manage your program in terms of finance and everything else. Having family and other supporters help pick that up, I mean, is huge.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely
first
huge.
off, Sarah, who gets a lot of props for having such a great social media presence, should be giving some credit to her dad next time someone tells her that.
Absolutely.
The other part of that is I think not only is it a good way to get people into the sport, it's a good way to keep people in the sport because you often, I mean, this is a big ponderous question that I could probably talk to you for hours about, and you probably could talk to me, but like why we lose kids that are 18, 19, like that. But if your dad has a boat or mama has a boat or they're just into sailing Wednesday night, then not only do you have like kind of nostalgic mental connection to it, but you can go home and sail, for a couple hours, and you don't have to be training on your 49 or 10 hours a day. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That ability, and that makes me think of the Lewin LaFrance sisters, particularly right now. Here's a funny little gem for you. Yeah, they're excited about going to the Olympics, and they're really looking forward to competing and putting their best foot forward and all those positive platitudes. And they talk just as much about racing home to sail with their father in the Blue Nose as they do about the Olympics. But that's what makes it so cool. It's like, yeah, we're going to do what we got to do, but then we're going home to sail with Dad to try to beat up on the local fleet. And I think that's amazing.
Another opportunity for me to focus on the Blue Nose fleet in Nova Scotia on this podcast comes up all the time. Somebody told me there will probably be 3 or 4 or 5 Olympians on that course this summer in Chester Race Week, because I know Jacob Saunders usually takes one of them, and both Georgia and Antonia will probably be sailing. Lisa Ross does that. She won the fleet last year.
And I think the odd time you can even get Guthrie out. You twist
yeah.
Colin's arm and he gets out there. And I know our new CEO Ryan is an avid Blue Nose supporter and sailor. So yeah, it's cool. I mean, I have to admit, I've never sailed the boat, and a lot of people bug me that it's next time you got to come and race. And I mean, they're right. I probably do need to come and race just to again do that enjoyable part of our sport, or enjoyable for me. A evening race at a club, nothing better. Bashing around the cans, having a few laughs. Of course, we're all competitive, and I know I'm still ultimately competitive, but do I love doing that where you just go out and enjoy the sport? There's nothing better.
That's the key, isn't it? If we were going to go right back to whether or not you're going to be successful, if you're somebody who's just got coaches around you all the time, from the time you step into an opti, compared to somebody who gets to go out sailing by themselves or just for fun. Those are the kids or the people. I mean, you know better than me. Are those the people who manage to keep going and manage to become successful as high performance athletes?
Yeah, for sure.
So let's see. Here's another bizarre one. How much do you love wet notes?
I live and die by them. I mean, anybody, and they probably make fun of me because as I'm getting old, right? I sit and I look around the debrief yesterday. We were having the debrief after a good day's sailing, and everybody's got their phones out, right? And they're just typing in their notes. Well, not old me. I've got my wet notes out, and I'm writing in my wet notes, still the same as I always did. Yeah, I live and die by it. Best thing ever.
I mean, I actually I have this kind of bizarre. I have a question. I have this thing where I cut them in 2 and I put them on either side of my cockpit, so I can write the compass settings on either side on Velcro, and then I can change them at the end of the day. But the reason I ask is I was going to buy some when I was ordering some from West Marine 6 years ago. There was a review by you.
Oh, really?
Comments about wet notes, 3 or 5-inch, 40 pages. You use these exclusively while coaching national sailing team. A must-have for quality on-water note-taking.
Absolutely. And I still, the thing I give, and I'll give Sail Canada some credit. I'm looking around to see if I have a set on my desk. We've actually done our own now, which I always, feel double proud because, I like to support West Marine and wherever I've been able to buy them in the past. But the fact that I can actually get Sail Canada ones, they have a picture of the Lewin LaFrance sister on the back of it, and it's like, and it lives in my pocket.
We can buy that, or that's only.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
really? Okay. Well,
Absolutely.
I'm immediately getting online for one of those. So let's. I wanted to go through. I have questions for some of the venues you've been to. Which, and so again, let's run through them basically. Let's see if I can remember. So starting in '92, Barcelona, right?
Yep.
'96 is Savannah.
Yep.
2000 is Australia, Sydney.
Yep. Sydney.
2004 is Athens.
Yep.
'08 is China. Yep.
Yeah.
Qingdao.
Qingdao.
Yeah. 12 is London.
Yep.
16 is Rio. 20 is Tokyo.
Yep.
No notes there, people. This is
There you
just
go.
off the top. So of all those venues, which one had the best food?
Best food. That's funny. I'm going to say Barcelona.
Okay.
The very first one. And you know why I'm going to, and I'll give you the quick why.
Sure.
It wasn't even so much that it was the best food, but the sailing venue was fully part of the Olympic Village that year, and so the concourse was around the top, and there was a Pizza Hut and a few things. And why I say best food, one of my fondest memories, Boris Beckert. Hey dude, hey bearded dude, hey!
Oh.
And dropping me a pizza from the top level so I could catch it down in the yard and hand it out to the sailors.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, we have
Yeah.
to take that back a little bit because not everyone might know who Boris Becker is. So take me back to that. You're just more details, please.
Yeah, so Boris is there playing at the Olympics, and like for
Tennis
me,
player,
it's
everybody.
like
Yeah.
tennis player, legendary tennis player, standing on the concourse, checking out all the sailors as we've come in after sailing.
Oh, you're on the water.
Yeah, we had just come in, and because where our containers and stuff were was right under this concourse, he could see us all de-rigging and chatting and stuff, and he just started waving and calling out and tossed his pizza down to us, tossed it in a box, and, hey, enjoy, great on you Canadians, and off he went. And it was just like, okay, that was weird, but that makes the food the best, even though it was, was it great pizza? Who cares? I don't even remember what it was. I just remember hand delivery from Boris Becker. I'll take it any day.
Oh, that's hilarious. So then, which venue? I know, like for example, in Montreal, they had it way out in Kingston. What's that? 200 miles away or whatever.
Yeah.
But well worth the travel. I don't know where they would have had it. I have denigrated Montreal way too many times on the podcast, but great job getting that at the Olympics in '76. Which venue was the furthest? Which Olympics had the sailing venue the furthest away from the actual athletes' village or center of town?
Wow. I mean, I got to think in all of those, a number of them are pretty far. I mean, Qingdao was a long way from Beijing. And I don't know total number of Ks, but I know it was in the magnitude of a 3.5-hour flight.
Flight?
But even,
Oh,
flight.
okay.
Even Atlanta compared to Savannah. I mean, we went for the opening ceremonies in Atlanta, and that was a 4-hour bus ride or 4.5-hour bus ride, so that's plenty long. I mean, and in both of those scenarios, though, we never lived in the village, so our exposure to the village was very limited. Both Athens and Sydney, we did live in the village, but you had different means of having to get there. So in Athens, it was buses, and it was painful as you meandered your way through Athens city streets. Sydney, I got to say, massively enjoyable. It took about 50 minutes, door to door, but you're on a ferry.
Oh, wow.
And so, you're going up the river and getting dropped off, and you're getting dropped off in the sailing venue or in the Olympic Village. And in between, you had to ride on a ferry. So, you know what? It was nice.
That's great.
And they had the big screens with the sports all going, and you just relaxed and hung out, and it became just part of your commute was this ferry ride, but pretty damn nice ferry ride.
What about the commute from Saskatoon to Elbow in '89?
Oh, yeah. Hilarious, right? I mean, I got to admit, that ride, I got to tell you a funny story about that.
Just because people have been telling me I do too many inside stories. This was 1989 Canada Summer Games in Saskatoon. I'm assuming that was your first year, so you're coaching the Saskatchewan provincial team.
Yeah.
Elbow, Saskatchewan, where Lake Deaford Baker is actually one of the nicest places I've ever sailed in my life, and Saskatoon was where it was held. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and the funny part about all of that, Dave, was being an Ontario boy, guilty as charged. I knew nothing about the prairies. And I didn't even know they had water in Saskatchewan. I know that sounds ridiculous, but water that you would race on and sail on? No, I mean, I didn't. I had never thought about that. And Lake Diefenbaker, beautiful, beautiful place to sail. And Albo, yeah, little community, great golf course to their credit, which
Okay.
I very much liked. And the commute, I'll tell you, the funniest part about the commute for me wasn't during the games, but was when they asked me to help deliver their travel lift from Saskatoon to Elbow.
What kind of? Well, I
Now,
don't know what you mean. What's the travel?
big travel lift for launching keelboats, the
Oh,
big
oh yeah, yeah,
giant.
yeah. Yeah.
Right? So drove that from Saskatoon to Diefenbaker. No, we didn't drive down the highway. You're going like 10 and a half kilometers, 13 kilometers an hour. And we would just radio ahead, and the farmers would lower their fence so that we could just drive as the crow flies from Saskatoon to Elbow. Best commute ever.
Well, so I guess I wanted to go through each of the Olympics. Well, did we get to, like, when did you transition? Like, I know you raced lasers, obviously final flying Scots when you were 3. And then you were a Finn, you raced Finns as well at some point. Like, take me through the
Yeah.
end of your, like,
Yeah,
competitive sailing career into coaching.
I did a ton of I did a ton of dinghy sailing growing up. I mean, for sure, people would know me as a laser sailor and then a fin sailor. Um, but I got to be honest. I mean, my age group sailing, I did double-handed stuff. I did triple-handed stuff. I did anything I could get my hands on in terms of sailing. I was one of those big believers, and still am, that you can learn from sailing with and against anybody if you have an open mind and you're willing to use it for what it's worth. I probably enjoyed sailing double-handed at least equally as much as sailing single-handed because I liked having somebody to talk to and
Right.
do stuff with and to challenge. Sailing albacores with friend Alan Stewart from back at Fanshawe. We sailed the albacore age group championships for years, and it's where I met people like Milner and Johnny Clark, who were albacore sailors as well. And I was like, okay, these are good guys that are my age that are sailing this boat and enjoying it. And Alan's father had a nice wolf, all wood, looked like a piece of furniture. Like I was so nervous sailing it the first time because it was nicer than any piece of furniture I'd ever seen. But that, so and it was funny. Towards the end of my sailing career, quite honestly, I had already resigned isn't the right word. I'd already in my head said coaching and being a training partner was what I got the motivation out of and I got the positive feeling from. The competition, yeah, I love doing it. I always love competing and I still compete like crazy about anything. But I really like sharing and working with people and trying to inspire. And I did a lot of coaching, and hopefully that's sort of the second part of the question. My transition through university, I coached high school volleyball, I coached high school hockey, and I coached sailing. And on the sailing end, it was really the couple formative years at Geneva Park,
Oh
working
yeah,
for Ontario Sailing. I
that's worth
worked up
getting
there for
into at
two
some
summers.
point too. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, like I said earlier, graduated. Really didn't know 100% what I was going to do. Teachers College I was in, wasn't completely enthralled by that, and stepped away from that and went and worked at Hood Sail Loft in Toronto. You know what I was good at? I was good at cutting out sail numbers and reinforcement patches.
That's an
And
important job, though, man.
oh yeah, somebody had to do it. That's what they told me. I was good at sweeping the floor. And no, I mean, and I learned a ton there. Give them a ton of credit, teaching me how to do a luff curve on a sail, those sort of things that I then used in my coaching career later on. But it was one of those transitional opportunities where I just needed a chance, in fairness, to get away from London, see what I was going to do, see where my passion would take me. And then, ironically, got the offer right after Christmas time. Both hockey offer and sailing offer to go to Saskatchewan, and I chose Saskatchewan. which very quickly, 2.5 years there, morphed into a couple opportunities as a contract coach at a few events for the national team. And then started working for Sail Canada. Well, it was actually Canadian Yachting Association at the time, back in May of 1990.
Okay.
So, yeah, a
So
few years ago.
89 was your only Canada Games coaching.
Yeah, 89 was my only one coaching. I have gone to a couple since as doing other things, driving people crazy, being the Sail Canada person around. You know, my favorite one was last time where were we? Sherbrooke in Quebec, and I was doing the color commentary on the water.
That's when
And so
Fraser won the gold, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Everyone, Fraser Wells from New Brunswick.
yeah, absolutely. And I had a VHF in the rib and just drove around and did commentary so the parents sitting on shore and the fans sitting on shore could hear about what was going on the race course. I have to say that was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Geneva Park. And so my memory is only, so my brother went to youth in 1983 and it was there already, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So Ontario Sailing Center. And because it was that early and I wasn't really involved, it's just always kind of like Ontario Sailing Center. And he went, there were dorms and stuff like that. It sounds kind of idyllic, but it also sounded like it was kind of not the best spot. Like Peter didn't enjoy where they were living and everything like that. But it seems like a really cool idea. So tell me about the Ontario Sailing Center at Geneva Park.
Yeah, the thing about it, you know, and 100%, best lake to sail in? No. You know, Lake Couchiching, totally fine lake, but pretty small, not a lot of waves, lots of weeds. But we were part of a YMCA camp, so there were there was a very nice lodge, dormitories, and then there were, I'm not sure what you would call them, dorm rooms, but they were just, they were just like long houses with a bedroom. If you lay in the bed, you could touch the wall on the other side of the room with your hand. You know, it was pretty prehistoric. Shared washrooms, the whole deal. But we did get to eat in the nice lounge area, or like in the proper area, so great food. But from a sailing perspective, holy smokes! I mean, what an opportunity as a young coach. I think I was 18 when I was there, 19 coaching, and ironically working with people like Mike Milner. You know, my current boss and I worked together there. Mark Lamons, Hank's older brother, was working there. David Wells, Felicity Clark, the Treesman brothers, and you just go on and on down the list. Jeff Eckert, the Stampers. You know, it covered a real range of people that were there as full-time coaches, and so we always had a huge opportunity to work on our sailing while we were getting to coach sometimes young, sometimes older people, because we had adult learn to race weeks, we had all kinds of stuff, but invariably it meant 5 o'clock, we knock off for the day, and we go sail for 3 hours, and then run in and get the end of dinner. And so often you would have a couple fins out there, a couple lasers out, a 470 out sailing, and then we'd all come racing in and be sprinting into the line to get food just before it shut for the night. So it really was this idyllic balance as a young athlete that was still competing, but getting a coach as well.
Right.
And some of them, like Mike and Mark, Mike Milner and Mark Lamons, they go off to Europe for 3 weeks. And so we'd have to bring in another coach to fill their spot. But that was a whole part of Ontario's wisdom in bringing in coaches that were still actively competing. Sure. Because you were very fresh, you were very current, you were very real. And there was always somebody waiting in the wings to fill in for that week or 2 weeks you were gone to Europe competing in some event.
And obviously that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, there's no Ontario Sailing Center like that.
It's still there.
Oh, well, of course,
I
the
went
lake's
by
still
it
there.
the other day.
Oh, yeah?
It's still there. Well, even the building that we used to work out is still there. But
Okay.
no, there is no Ontario Sailing Center as such like that.
Right. So why do you think it didn't continue to be a kind of successful entity?
It's a really good question, because I've often wondered why we don't recreate it, to be quite honest. I mean, one of the things, and this might sound funny to some people, I think one of the pieces about it that was the best wasn't the sailing and everything else we did, but the opportunity for all the coach education. At that point in time, we were doing green, blue, red, orange as the colors of coaching. Now it's, can sail 1 to 2, can sail 5, 6, comp dev. So they have different names, but same things.
Right.
And you would do those as intense 1 week clinics in house there. And there was no worrying about not having enough time. Well, the day is 24 hours long. And when you're captive, you can get a lot covered because no one's going anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? You're just there, and that's all you're doing. And so I think that was one of the best things about that place was May and early June, we do 6 weeks of those types of clinics. Unbelievable. And then the flip side, and maybe why it doesn't exist, I would say probably our most profitable was bringing in adult learn to race people.
Oh, wow.
Was the one that, were always oversubscribed. It wasn't necessarily the sailing team. The sailing teams couldn't afford, in essence, to pay to have to come to such a place to not be Kingston or not be a place that was more like where they would race. I did, in fairness, I was there both as a coach, but also there as a national team member. And I remember, and I love Geneva Park, but I remember being critical of the fact that, yeah, we're all sailing lasers, and I'm sailing fins now, and just imagine that's somebody who did still sail lasers a lot, where you have a Soling sailor or a Tornado sailor saying, oh, we're here sailing lasers. This is just a waste of time. I don't have time to waste. And, so it was great for team building, 100%, and it was great for fitness testing and all those things. For training in the Olympic end of things, not really.
Yeah.
I mean, very valuable. And Mike and I often talk about it, obviously, as alumni of the place. Why hasn't something like that been recreated or, and I'm sure cost is one of the factors. Willingness and ability to have the price tag at such a place that you can actually afford to do it.
Yeah. We did that.
But I miss it every time I drive by Aurelia. I think about it. I got to admit. I mean, I drive by and I'll say to my wife, "Remember? You remember hearing me telling stories about there?"
Yeah. I mean, there is, like you say, that captivity for a couple of times when I was training as a youth. We'd go to exactly that, a summer camp. And we were always like, what is this place? This lake sucks or whatever. But then after every day, you're there. You're everyone's talking about sailing. You didn't go home. You didn't go out. You just were there. So there's definitely value to that.
Well, and one of the things, just let me build off that just for a sec, Dave, just to sort of bit of a shout out to Fanshawe, right? I mean,
Yes.
I've said it several times.
Well, just to start, okay, so Fanshawe was your local yacht club in London.
In London.
What
It's
was-
man-made lake.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it's 3 miles long. At its widest point, it's 1.5 miles. And that's where I grew up sailing. And I still say with great pride that that's where I grew up sailing. Because it's people that go there go, how did you possibly grow up sailing here? And I'm like, it's a body of water that had good wind. I could go sail 100% safe. My parents didn't have to worry, right? Because it's such a small lake. If it's blowing 25 knots and Ken capsizes 50 times, he's going to hit the shore at some point. And then the only thing he has is a long, embarrassing walk home. He doesn't have to worry about drifting to Rochester or drifting out in the middle of the ocean. Right? And so, I mean, I always say it lightly, but I also say to people, you don't have to come from a mega club or, it doesn't have to be a Royal to be the best place to learn to sail or the only place to learn to sail. I mean, we had a great, power to my parents and some of the other parents, we had a great junior club race program driven by volunteer parents when I was growing up there. And there are 3 or 4 guys. I mean, one went on to be, there's me as a coach now at the national team level for a lot of years. But one of the other guys went on to be a national team volleyball player. But he was a very good, age group sailing coach, age group sailor. Mm-hmm. And so it was like we never felt that we were hard done by, and again, I got to shout out to my folks for doing it. Biggest reason too, hey, you had Fanshawe, totally safe, and we went up to Grand Bend at least for 2 weeks every year. So you're on Lake Huron, you would get the big waves,
okay.
You would get exposure to sailing in something other than flat water, and so it wasn't so shocking the first time you sailed in a place where it was, waves were bigger than 7 inches tall.
Right. So
So anyway, I say that just because I really think those people, I often hear, oh, but I don't come from a great sailing place. Doesn't matter.
No.
I think of Larry, right? Larry Lemieux, legend, absolute legend. Legend as a sailor, legend as a coach, legend as a person. And where'd he grow up sailing? Wasn't like he grew up
Alberta.
sailing in Vancouver. You know, he grew up sailing where most of us don't think there's any water.
Was
Right?
Alberta somewhere, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's in Alberta, Glenmore Reservoir, right? And he has no shame in telling anybody that. Great place to learn to sail and enjoy our sport. Doesn't matter where you are.
This
you
is
can
like
enjoy it.
10 different things have come to me, and I should have written them down. But the first, about Larry, I've had this story. Someone has said it was true. One other person, no, two now. So if I get three confirmations on this actually happened. I was told that Larry could drive while reading a book.
100%. Taught me.
So he would drive his 14 hours or whatever it took to get to Toronto from Alberta, reading a book while he was driving.
Yeah, left foot up on the dash, right? Steering wheel and book in right hand. Yeah. Oh yeah, I watched him do it often, and I have to admit, and don't anybody slay me for it. I mean, when I say he taught me to do it, when I saw him do it, I was like, wow, that's a great way. Especially, I didn't fully appreciate it until I moved to Saskatoon.
Yeah.
And even just driving to Regina, it's like there's a half a degree of curve in the road between Saskatoon and Regina. And so you're just driving, reading a book's pretty easy when you don't have anything keeping you between the lines, but there isn't anybody else out there, and it's real straight.
Okay, kids, do not try this at home.
No, don't do it at home. Do not do it at home. My wife still laughs about it. We saw somebody doing it the other day, and she's like, and I was laughing, and she said, that's exactly what you look like when I met you. Foot up on the dash, driving a Chevy panel van, and the guy had a book in his hand. I was just like, wow.
That's great. What club or junior sailing program in Canada don't we know about that we should? Something like a Fanshawe or a...
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? I'm going to probably do disrespect to a lot, unfortunately. But people, when I think of the East, I think of two that were very formidable to me when I say the East Coast. Lunenburg. Spent a lot of time training there with the pair boys.
Yeah.
But also with a very well-developed sonar fleet where you had multi-world champions when you go out for a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night race. One that's becoming more and more known, St. Margaret's Bay Sailing Club, one of the best open-door clubs that I've ever encountered, and I can only thank them for how much they've welcomed the national team to an amazing sailing venue. And one of the ones I know that a lot of people, and it falls into my list, and I get in these great arguments or discussions about this with people, Gimli Yacht Club in Manitoba. And people, when they ask me to rate, the top 10 places to sail in North America, and Gimli is on my list. And people are always like, why? And I'm like, well, because if you haven't seen mosquitoes that are big enough to carry your boat, then you have to go there. But no, in all reality, if you get a northerly, you get the biggest lake waves because it's so shallow and the toughest conditions you've ever sailed in. And to this day, in all the training I've done, I've yet to go there, get shut out, not having enough breeze, having too much wind. And again, a place where, well, here are the keys to the locker, here are the keys to the washroom. Go crazy, do whatever you want, and they just welcome you there with open arms. And so it's some of those small clubs like that I think people miss.
Yeah.
We drive by it because it's a little too far off Highway 1. It's 45 minutes north, so you just drive on by. Well, that lake that Gimli's on makes Lake Ontario look like a puddle, right? 3 Lake Ontarios fit in Lake Winnipeg.
That's right, yeah.
But people don't think about that, and I'm not talking depth and everything, but surface area, and a fabulous place to sail. At the same time, you know what? It's the people at the clubs that make them, in each one of those cases, it's the people at the clubs that make great sailing places you want to go back to. Because they welcome you, they open the door, they explain things to you. You get included in a Wednesday night race, and you're up against Andreas Josenhans. Holy smokes! I mean, that's just awesome.
That's Lunenburg,
you're doing
everyone.
Training. Yeah, you're training for the Paralympics with Paul Tingley and Scotty Lutz and Logan Campbell, and AJ has offered, hey, yeah, I'll come out. How many days a year? Well, we're here for this week. I can sail every day this week. He comes out on his own dime, on his own time to train with these guys, sailing his own boat against them. You know, Brian Todd shows up with another sonar. All of a sudden, we're doing three boat testing, one para boat, two very more than capable sailing boats, enabling us to go and get a bronze medal in Rio, or helping us to go and get that bronze medal in Rio. And they're doing it off their own back. They're not doing it because they owe anybody anything. They're doing it because they love sailing. And those places are amazing when you have that kind of experience.
Well, how about when you say what's important about the club members? How about Fanshawe? How do I know that how you placed in the 1979 Laser Championships there? Someone's gone through and has kept right up to today, to the 2023 championships are on their website. Like, how important is that?
It's a simple club, but I can tell you, I still think back to winning, the Champion of Champions race, and people yelling at you from the cliff, "You're cheating!" Because I'd be rocking too much or whatever, and being excited about that. It was great fun.
Yeah.
Just awesome fun.
So let's take a completely left-hand turn, because I know you also coached at the Pan Am several times, right?
Yeah, 6 times.
How sad is it to have lost the Hobie 16? That's a genuine question.
Dead genuine. I know that, and it's, when I first started, my answer would have been totally different.
Okay.
Because I would have said, when I first started, I was like, oh, Sunfish, Hobie 16, Lightning, Snipe. What are you talking about? These boats are, they're nothing to do with what we do. And now it's like, Sunfish? Hey, we have the defending gold medalist in the Sunfish in Lee Parkhill. And I can tell you, you have to fight tooth and nail to win that. And the South American and the Caribbean countries take the Sunfish, the Hobie, they take it massively as an important deal. Like it's the Olympics.
And everyone can afford those boats.
And you can afford it. And you can get one off the beach, and you go and race, and you can have fun, and you're competitive. I mean, I remember in Gimli, ironically, when the games, what was that, 1999 Pan Am Games were in Winnipeg. The sailing was in Gimli. David Sweeney and Kevin Smith, our Tornado team, transferred back into the Hobie 16 and trained like crazy so that they could be competitive. And everybody's like, well, what do you mean? They're Tornado Olympians. They've been to the games. David came fourth in 92. He's way back. No, you're not. These people that sail these boats are good. And you have to sail your best to be competitive, let alone to beat them. And, it's so hard. And I get caught up in, and it's a bit of a segue to the new stuff, all the flying boats and flying boards and everything else. You get caught up in this technology, cost, and whatever, what everybody can sail and what everybody can recognize. And, I'm the first to admit, I'm getting old. As much as I don't like to say that, I know I'm getting old.
There's evidence right there on the screen.
Yeah. And I see those flying boats and flying boards, and I'm like, wow, I'm not even sure if that's sailing. But it is what sailing has morphed to. When I first saw a 49er, I was like, really? That's where we're going? And now it's like, 49er kind of seems like a little bit of an easy boat. Let's get something a little more exciting. It's still in the water. It isn't really even that fast. There's the other side, the tried and true, and everybody would know, he's going to talk about the Finn. Of course I am. The Finn was an amazing boat and still is an amazing boat, and they get 300 plus guys come to the World Championships after it's no longer Olympic. That's because it's an amazing boat. And so it's not Olympic anymore. Who cares?
It was freed from the Olympics.
It was freed from the games. Exactly. Same like the Star. Great boat, freed from the games, and the numbers get bigger. And more people feel comfortable to come out and race. And it's not that they're not good. They are really, really good. And you still see the legends like the Robert Scheitz and that K-Yards go back and race in these events because it's good fun with old friends, developing another level of people involved in high performance sailing. I love the old classes, and it would go to me. My 2 cent pitch to any
Go for
club:
it.
if you can get everybody sailing boats that take away some of the physical advantages, i.e., size and everything else, but it's one design pretty much, or very close, like a blue nose, like a shark. I know people are going to laugh and say, you're actually advocating a shark. I've heard you say so many bad things about a shark. No, but if there's 15 sharks out there sailing,
Exactly.
and you got 7 world champions in the boat, it's good racing.
Yep.
I can guarantee
Yep.
it, and it's going to make it even better. Whatever the class is, same boats, take away some of that. Okay, you got to be 230 pounds and be able to bench press 250 in order to do it. Okay, there aren't too many people that can do that. So, but you take some of that part away, make it simple. No, sonar. I mean, everybody. We always have this argument. 2.4 meter. When I think of if I wanted to see a champion of champions race, I would want to have everybody have to go 2.4 meter and take away it. Then you got Tingley, so I can win my argument finally. Like, who is the best? I don't know who the best is, to be quite honest. Who's better? Is Ross better than Paul? Well, people are going to tell me.
I'll pay a lot of money to see that race, please.
I would pay a lot of money to see that race too. And let's throw Terry in the mix. Both Terrys, McLaughlin and Nielsen. And now you've taken out the physical, can't hike anymore, blah, blah. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Now you're all sailing a boat where we can just get close to being equal. And when you talk about, and as you can imagine, we'll sit around, it's going to happen at the Olympics. It happens at every major game. That conversation comes up. Who are the top 10 sailors that you've ever met? Who are the top 10 sailors that you even know of? And they're great, robust discussions, and it's always interesting.
Are you talking all time or just?
All
okay.
time.
Yeah.
And you hear the youngsters, and I won't categorize what that is, talking about people that I'm like, okay, they don't even make my top 30. Yeah. But then I say a name, and they're like, who? Paul who? Elfstrom. Paul Elfstrom. What did he do? And you go through the list. Oh yeah, I guess I can probably get him on my list. You guess you can get him on your list. What are you talking about? But they're great conversations, and I always think, how fun would it be to be able to do, even if it's just hypothetically, the who's who of Canada sailing against each other in a boat where the physical part doesn't make the difference.
Okay, well, you heard it here first. What we're going to call the Whitecap Series 2.4, Greatest Sailors of All Time in Canada series. It's going to take place on Gimli Lake, or possibly the old Ontario Sailing Centre. We got Paul Tingley, Terry McLaughlin, Terry Nielsen. Who else? We got a fourth in there?
Oh, you'd have Ross for sure. The number of people you could include. You have Hank.
Yep.
You have you got to make one of the Faux brothers sail to represent their father,
yep,
and the legacy in that family. You got Johnny Millen. And then, we haven't even talked about some of the more modern, the Oscar Johanssons, the Bernie Lutmers, the Chris Cooks, who, the young people would think they're old. They're not that old. I can tell you, they're not that old, and they still know how to sail.
Yep.
Right? And you put them all together at a regatta, wow, what fun would that be?
I was going to say, like, going back to the Hobie 16, but first of all, did those guys do well in Gimli? Sweeney and Smith?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't remember whether... I know they won a medal. Okay. And shamedly, I can't tell you which one. I can tell you that the thing that I found most amazing was after the day one, they were not doing so good. Everybody else is in on shore. Coach, we got to go out. And they were out trying to dial it in. And they did that for the first 2 days after sailing. They went back out, and they did ultimately get a medal. And it was cool.
Because my experience, I was racing my laser forever, and then I got an opportunity to do because somebody could lend me a boat and give me a place to stay. I did the Masters Worlds in Dunleary 2018. It was amazing. It was such a great regatta. It was, several things kicked off the bucket list, blew like stink the whole week. And I was like, I'm actually not having a ton of fun here being 50th out of 59 because I haven't trained enough. I'm not like a marathon runner yet. So I
Yeah.
said, okay, I'm retired from the laser now. I'm going to see what I want to sail next. I got on Hobie 16, and in 5 minutes, I was like, I am never going back on a laser. This is so much fun. I had one out in New Jersey, raced around the Statue of Liberty twice, but I couldn't race. Like, I could race against 10 people twice a year, pretty much. And I want to be
Yeah.
able to sail a boat where I can race against 20 people every weekend in the summer. So I sail lasers. And I treat it differently now. I really do treat it as an athletic boat. Like, if I'm not fit enough, I can't expect to do well. It's like I wouldn't, and people, I don't know if they get this in terms of that boat. Like, I wouldn't walk out my door and try to run a marathon and expect I can finish anywhere near the first half. Like, that boat,
Oh,
especially now,
exactly.
requires that. So,
Oh yeah, something like the laser. I mean, and people have often misrepresented sailing, but something like the laser. I mean, it's an endurance sport, and if you're not trained to the level required, you can pretend you can do it, and of course you can physically do it for about a hundredth of the length of time that you need to be able to do it for. Just like if you and I, Dave, are standing on the side of the road during, you know, Boston Marathon. And we decide, because we can run, we're going to run beside the leaders, and we can run beside them for one block. The only thing is, they're doing it for that speed for the entire marathon. Well, we proved we could do it for one
yeah.
block, and we were pretty happy about that. But it's not really that different if you try to compare the level of training that's going into, like, this camp we got going on in the Ilka Six. Is the level of training for somebody like Sarah, and to have someone go up against her and think you're going to compete against her just because you were a good sailor in your day. You're in a totally different league, actually, even though you're sailing the same boat.
Isn't that great, though?
And that's not saying it
Yeah.
negatively, trying to say it negatively.
If you give that example of the Boston Marathon, which is quite hard to qualify, right? You have to have a pretty good time. So let's imagine this scenario. You and I are standing at the start, and we decide to run it. Well, okay, we messed up, but or we couldn't have because we didn't qualify. But sailing, I can go down to race the Miami OCRs and sail against Robert Scheidt. Like, what a sport!
Absolutely.
I can't. You can't go
Yeah.
out and play basketball with LeBron James. But that's
Yeah,
what
or
an
tennis
amazing thing
against
about our
Rafa.
sport.
Yeah. You're not going to pick up the racket and say to Rafa, hey, you want to go smash it around a little bit? And he'd be like, yeah, sure. I mean, he'd probably agree to because he's a good man. But would you actually be able to hit the ball? No.
Well, I did. This has gone completely off the rails, but I'm very happy with it off the rails. We should talk about 2024. That was in my assignment sheet. So we've got 6 sailors going. How not even how you rate our chances. How would you ascertain the whole quad? Who's came out on top, and where we are as a high performance sailing squad. Big
Yeah.
question.
I yeah. Tough question, and I'll put myself out on a limb a little bit. We have with Sarah Douglas in the Oak Six, and with George and Antonia in the FX, we have two legitimate medal race teams, so top 10, that have the potential to be on the podium, but also could miss the medal race by 1 or 2 spots. And not because they're not good enough, but because that's how competitive the top 12, 15 in the fleet is. Crazy in terms of how competitive it is. For me to sit here and pretend to say, yeah, we're going to win one of those, or we're going to win a medal in both of them. We have the potential to win a medal in both of them, but they need to have a career week, just like anybody that wins a medal there needs to have a career week, because if they don't, the person that everybody would say, well, they're probably going to come fourth, well, they come third. And then if the person in second doesn't have a career week, well, then now that one that would be fourth ranked now comes second, and the one that's fifth is third. It truthfully is that competitive. So we have two very, very solid teams that, and I'm not saying that to put any undue pressure on them. They feel enough pressure as it is, right? I mean, they've poured them the heart and soul into it, and for sure, no matter how good natured we all try to be, they feel pressure that they're wearing the leaf and trying to perform for a lot of people, including themselves. And that's part of what we always have to try to manage, is that you're there doing for yourself the best you can do, and not to let some of the pressure get to you too negatively.
Right.
You know, our 49er boys, Will Jones and Justin Burns, I think great story, right? I mean, Justin is a story of perseverance, a story of coming back to the event after, for all intents and purposes, being retired. You know, and Willie, second time around at the games, how are they going to do? I could tell you probably within one or two places where they're going to finish, but it's actually immaterial.
Yeah.
To me, it really comes down to, do they go and execute the event that they've been training to do? And if they do that, I don't really care whether that means they come 14th or 17th or 19th. It doesn't matter. If they execute the event completely, leave it there, fully done, they've done. The score doesn't matter. The effort and the execution is what matters. If they were to back off and not execute the second half of the event because they get disenchanted with whatever is going on, well, I'd have a bigger problem with that, and then I would care about the score. I'd care that the score wouldn't be as positive as it could be. You know, but if they go out there and pour it all out, and everybody else does, and they come 14th, well, guess what? That was good.
Mm-hmm.
They're the 14th best sailors in that class in the world, and that's bloody amazing.
Yep.
No matter how you cut it, you know. And then the story around Emily is, I think, is in the Formula Kite very interesting, right? It's new class. It's not something Canada's poured a whole bunch of resources into at all. Anybody that hasn't seen it, you know, you can go down to your local beach and see people kiting, but then take a look if you see somebody flying around, you know, half a meter above the waves and going 3 times faster than everybody else. That's more what we're talking about. Talking about in your rib, and you try to shoot video of technique, and they basically pull away from you while you're trying to shoot the video. They're going 35 knots upwind.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal inclusion in our sport. Where it lands and everything else, there's all kinds of debate. But I think what Emily's done in getting there, and getting us the exposure to get there, having us pay attention to it, opens a whole nother vein for people to aspire to. And I would say, probably equally importantly, for anybody that doesn't know, Emily came through the youth sailing development program. She was a 29er sailor at the Youth Worlds. So she was a quality age group sailor competing at the Youth Worlds in the 29er, and is now qualified to go to the Olympics on a foiling kite. Anybody can go anywhere, you know. So when you think of, well, what does my laser sailing do, or my 420 sailing do for me? I mean, Georgia Louin-LaFrance went to 3 Youth Worlds sailing an I-420, and she's at the Olympics sailing an FX. You don't have to have sailed just that boat or whatever.
In the inverse of Emily, the other girls were not from the dinghy sailing program and were that close.
Exactly.
So that's pretty cool too, especially for the kiting, because you wouldn't get that. You know, somebody's not going to jump in a laser that had never sailed an opt. You know what I mean? Yeah.
No, exactly. And it's just a whole nother, it just introduces so many new elements to our sport. Incredible speed. I mean, yeah, there's cost and everything else to it, but it's pretty cool when you think, you know, you're talking about flying. Literally, you know, how do you fly? And I mean, I always, and that's because I'm old, I think of the Wright brothers and the planes and seeing pictures of people jumping off cliffs with wings and stuff. Yeah, we're legitimately flying on the water now. And it's really cool.
It's really cool.
It's really cool. And it's really fast.
I need to talk about some of the athletes you've worked with over the years. I mean, I'm just going to throw out names of the biggest names that I know of. So Ross McDonald, you know, 2 double medalist, bronze in 92, silver in 04. But tell me about Ross, your experience with him, what kind of sailor he is.
Yeah, I mean, he's, I'll start off one of the finest men there is for anybody to get to know. Very fine man, dedicated. I can tell you without doubt, for me, him winning a bronze medal in 92, where there were a number of disappointments for other people, including myself, at the event, was a very motivating thing to say, hey, Canadians can do it. You know, we can win medals at this level. It's not going to be easy, anything like that. But him and Eric were a fabulous team, Eric Jesperson, that, you know, were committed. And Ross was always committed to being excellent. And I'll never forget, and he pounded it into my head as one of the people that worked him, not sole coach, but a coach that worked with him, where he said, you know, my goal at the Olympics is to continue to get better every day until the final day and still have a shot at a medal. Then he would assess as it being a successful event, that he did continue to improve through the event. Not, oh, I'm out of it. No, I'm going to keep fighting, and I'm going to keep fighting, and I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep getting. And this is a guy that was, people say, how could he get better every day? He was getting better every day. He's still getting better every day. And it was an adage that I think can, you know, resonate with a lot of people. It's continuous learning. It's getting more experience. And just because you're experienced doesn't mean you can't get more. Of course you can. And you're not going to see a new trick. Of course you will. You know, and Ross was very much about that, getting better every day. Or like he said to me, you know, if this is the box that most of us live in, we got to figure out how to occupy a box that's bigger than that box. And if we can do that before everybody else does, we have a chance of success. You know, it's thinking man.
That's
quality.
a really great way, because that question has come up a lot on this podcast as well, in terms of, or just, you know, process over performance, right? You just want to keep getting better every day, but in the end, the Olympics, that finish stays with you forever. So in a way, that performance becomes more important. But you're saying that Ross didn't look at it that way. It was still process.
Still process.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he would say to me after, I mean, I remember it to this day after winning that bronze medal, and he said, well, that was just a really good week of training. Now we got to get ready for the next
No,
one.
he did not.
Oh, yeah. Now we got to get ready for the next one.
Wow.
And it's just like, you know what, you're right. It at the end of the day, yeah, it was a test of what you'd done up to that time. But then once it's completed, it's just one more really quality training against the best people in the world.
So what about Hank Lammons? What can you tell me about the work and about him? I guess we talked a little bit, but yeah, talk to me about Hank.
Yeah, I mean, Hank, phenomenal athlete. You know, in terms of just pure athleticism, one of the best athletes I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And I mean, I think that's testimony and factually backed up when you think he's an NHL hockey player. I mean, he's a professional hockey player. He's a phenomenal athlete. Tireless, crazy competitor, like crazy competitive. But probably his work ethic is, most people would think, yeah, you know, that Adonis, that Atlas-like looking guy, yeah, everything was easy for him. Now, that was because of how much he was the behind-the-scene, you know, get out of bed, roll out onto the floor, do your 200 push-ups, your 200 sit-ups before you've had your coffee, before most people have gotten out of bed. He was always, you know, I'm going to do more work. It's going to be smart work. Early on in our lives, it wasn't always smart work. It was just more work. But then it became smart work as well, and refining that skill. You know, and I think one thing, if I had to, you know, talk about Hank, I mean, if it came to a physical, not physical fight like this, but a physical fight to who was going to win and who would persevere, he was going to win. I mean, he didn't know how to lose if it came to who can hike longer, who can hike harder, who can pump harder. He's going to do all those things, and he's just not. And he'll show that he's not tired, and he's beat, but he'll just keep doing it.
That's something that everyone can aspire to. You can't aspire to be like a better sailor, know more about wind shifts, et cetera, but you can aspire to be the fittest guy on the course. You really can.
100%.
Chris Cook had an excellent games, an excellent finish. What can you tell me about Chris?
I'm going to start it off, and he'll get mad at me, but I'll say it anyway. Polar opposite of Hank in some regards, but absolutely the same in others.
Yeah, okay.
Cooker would be who's going to be on the water first. You know, first time Cooker ever got beaten on the water was when he trained with Hank. He'd never had somebody rig faster and get on the water ahead of him. He was always first on the water, last off, until he sailed with Hank. And there was somebody that could, again, that competitive thing.
Yeah.
Are we going to win it? Who eats their food the fastest? Who cooks the best meal? Who wins the card game? Cooker was always, every little thing was about winning and learning how to win. And if you got beaten, taking something from it and learning how to apply that so that you could win at the next level. And when he put his mind to it, Crooker was a hard man. He wasn't the fittest guy. He didn't have the right stature in all regards, but he was a hard man that could endure probably more pain than anybody I know and still think, and then assimilate that and use it again in the future. Phenomenally competitive guy.
I just
Great friend.
Oh, cool!
Well.
I just met Paul Tingley at the GP event. Everyone, I know his history and everything. Amazing guy. At 30 seconds, I'm like, this guy is my best friend. Just because Paul Tingley, gold medalist in London, and then
Gold medalist in Beijing,
right,
or Qingdao,
yeah,
in the 2.4 meter, and bronze medalist in, most recently would have been in 2016 in the sonar. But I mean, you go back and he's a bronze medalist from when parasailing first got introduced to the sport. He won the world championships against all comers, abled and disabled, in the 2.4 meter. The guy is changed my outlook and my perspective on sailing completely. There wasn't a day that he didn't come ready to give it. And any of us that, and this might sound bad, you get up in the morning, you just don't feel like doing it that day. I'd look in the mirror and I'd think, yeah, and Paul is the unfortunate at this point in his life. He's in a chair. Other things he might have wanted to have done with his athletic career, because he was a great athlete and is a great athlete. How can I be a little down on myself when this guy's bringing positivity every day? And definitely a no stone unturned. You meet him, you'd never know that he's won everything under the sun, and you'd never know that he's capable still of winning everything under the sun. When we had our discussion earlier about who would be the best, he's in my top 5, and most people would say, in what boat? And I'm like, it doesn't matter, to be quite honest. You want to race against Paul and sonars? I'll put him up against anybody. You want to race him in 2.4 meters? I think you're going to wish you didn't choose that, because he would beat you. He's just a formative, but more than anything, just a character, a very positive character that impacts people around him in his own humble way by being an amazing leader, and impacted me and my family dramatically. Well, I mean, just a wonderful, wonderful man. And I have some great pictures. I mean, of him in his chair wheeling around the RNSYS parking lot, teaching athletes about points of sail, and having them, opti sailors, following him on land, and him talking through it. And it's just so cool to see it happen. And they're just captivated by this absolute phenomenal athlete telling stories.
One other athlete that I talked about when we were setting this up was a big hero of mine growing up in the East Coast in the 90s as a sailor, and that was Paul Thompson. And he went to 2 games. And what can you tell me about? And then unfortunately took his own life. So, what can you tell me about Paul as a sailor, and maybe the story as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, Paul. My first exposure to him, and this might sound kind of funny. So Geneva Park, you're talking about it. 1980 youth champs. We're up at Geneva Park, and there were these 2 ginormous red-headed dudes, Phil Gow, Paul Thompson. And then there was this other, dirty blonde that everybody knew, Gordy Anderson, and Freddie Kennedy. Right?
Thank God, Fred got on the show without even saying anything.
Yeah, and so here these boys, right? They come into our yard, right? Geneva Park. I mean, I was only 16, so I wasn't thinking I was going to be able to take these guys down, because they were all a couple years older than me at the time. But they were, they were the big swingers at that point in the single-handed age group sailing. But they're coming to Ontario, and they got to face me and Mike, and Hank was sailing double-handed at the time, so we didn't have him on our side. Dave Wells, and but it was like, hey, these novies can't come and rule our yard, right? This is our yard. And I was leading after the first 2 days, which was a big surprise because maybe not to me, but it was a big surprise to me. It was windy, right?
Yeah.
It was windy. I was a goon. I had people that asked me for ID to prove that I could still sail at youth sailing, not going to go into bars or buy beer. It was like, that guy can't be 16, right? Show me his birth certificate. So I had that advantage. I'm a little nasty from being a hockey player, right? You trained hard doing that. So windy for a couple days. Then we got a couple other days that I didn't do quite so well at. But long story short, that was really my introduction, particularly to Gordy, Paul, and Phil. And then we went up against each other again the next year. I think it was Lac Saint Joseph in Quebec. And then I had the benefit of, both working with them as athletes, Phil and Paul sailing the Soling, and then getting to know them as people, right? And at the games in Barcelona, I know they were very disappointed by their outcome. I think a lot of us probably feel different degrees of fault in how we did or didn't realize how the magnitude of that was going to impact Paul and others, because it impacted a lot of people in the community. It was certainly, to say something that we all learned from, I think we did, about how much is put into a campaign and how much investment, human time, financial time, emotional worth. And if you're not careful about doing proper debrief, talking about it with people, unfortunately, poor things might happen, and they don't have to be in the magnitude of Paul's situation. But I know a lot of athletes that, and I was talking with Sarah about it yesterday, that come out of the games and it's an incredible high, and no matter how you did outcome-wise, it's an incredible low as a change to real life. It's different life than what you live when you're a full-time, dedicated athlete that's poured a lot into it and that evolution. So I think, the biggest thing I would say now for me, when I think of what I learned from Paul, amazing competitor, great sailor, miss him, still miss him, think about him all the time, when I'm here in Toronto. In particular, I think about him here in Toronto, and that he made us all stand up and be accountable to understanding all the aspects of our sport, and that it's a very holistic piece that we have to take care of, and that we're people first, athletes second, and performance is tertiary to all of that, but we're people, and that being people and growing people. And for me, and maybe it's a good segue for, sort of end for me, is that most important part for me isn't how many medals, isn't how many games. I've been to lots. This will be my ninth game, six Pan Am games, 4 Paralympics. I couldn't even tell you how many worlds, more than 100 easily. Having had athletes in the top 10 for, I had a stretch for, I think, 12 years. I had an athlete finish in the top 10 at a world championships every year. That all really pales beyond when I see them succeed, these athletes succeed in life beyond, and you can think about maybe little pieces you've impacted, way more important than those medals and all that stuff. That was the journey that got us to a great end. And the sailing is a great journey. What better way to do it? Something you love doing? I've never worked a day in my life, right? Because it's a passion that I get to do. And yeah, it's hard work, but it's rewarding work, and it allows you to go forward. And it's the people on the journey that are the important part.
Really, that is going to be a perfect way to wrap up. I have to feel it's something special about the fact that I wanted to talk about PT, and that Fred Kennedy came out of that, because he's like my biggest hero, my best coach I ever had, sweetest guy, that family. So, Ken Dool, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So, as to wrap it out, as I like to say, sail fast, have friends. Wait, that's what. As I like to say to end it out, sail fast, have fun, make friends. I'll see you on the water.